My God, I was not prepared for all of the bombshells in this week's episode. Paul is a cheating scumbag, Lilia has her own character flaws, Rudy's has 2 new siblings, we're dropping another cutie out of the story. I can't keep up with all of this, Refugin. Please, just give me a break next week, I'm begging you. Hello everybody, I am Phenom Sage, and welcome back for another Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation review. Today we'll be talking about Episode 4, Emergency Family Meeting. Now, a lot happened this episode, as should be evident, but there's really no other place to start than with Paul. Paul, again, continues to be surprisingly the most interesting character in the series so far, and I really did not expect to be saying that in episode 1 of this show, but the stuff they're doing with Paul's character is so fascinating to me, and the main reason it's fascinating is because you just don't see stories tackle subject material like this anymore. Everything has become so sterilized and clean, and the fact that Refugin isn't afraid to approach concepts like adultery or straight up assault apparently is just so wild to me and so unexpected. But it's also refreshing because things like that happen in life, and above him tackling it in this story, what I find most interesting about this by far is that it's attached to a character that we actually like, or at least liked. Obviously, I can't speak for how many people are going to be turning on Paul after this episode, but the reality of life is that scummy people aren't just 100% mindlessly evil. Paul has good sides to his character as well, and for the first few episodes, he seemed like just a really nice, dependable Chad husband, and it's only when you get to know those kinds of people more that those uglier sides to them start becoming more and more apparent. It's so well done here, and it's honestly like Rudia says, even though Paul is definitely scum, there's sides to his characters I can't help but like. The only thing regarding this that kind of lost me though is that Paul is apparently if that's how far we're taking Paul this episode, then so be it. I'm not going to argue with how scummy Refugin wants to make him out to be, but that detail seemed just a little bit too far even for how much they wanted to villainize Paul this episode, and if that is indeed true and he did assault Lilia while she was sleeping, I do wonder what would even lead her to go work for him in the first place. I'm going to assume it's probably just a rough translation since I saw some comparisons to the light novel's explanation and it seems more like he just had a one-night stand with her, and that makes a lot more sense. That fits his character more in my mind than just him being a criminal. Speaking of Lilia though, I do love what they did with her character this episode because again, just like last week with Paul, she wasn't a character I was even really thinking about or acknowledging, and then all of a sudden she gets a ton of perspective and character flaws introduced to us, and she suddenly has become a much more interesting character. And there's a couple specific things I like about Lilia this episode, but one is her sense of loyalty and responsibility, not just to Rudius for saving her from her situation, but to Zenith and even Paul as well, to just sentence herself and her pregnant child to a month of traveling just because she understands the gravity of what she did wrong. It makes her perspective a lot more sympathetic because otherwise she would just be scum like Paul, although to be honest I don't really see how leaving your door ever so slightly open while washing yourself counts as seducing because that's still on Paul for going in there in the first place, but whatever, I get what they're going for. But the other thing that's interesting about Lilia is her history with Paul, because we learn that they trained swordsmanship together at school before Paul was a complete scumbag and ran away. I don't know if we'll ever get any more context or information about this, I hope we do, but one thing it says about Lilia, other than she supposedly is skilled at swordsmanship just like Paul is that she might have an unhealthy relationship with Paul in general. If she went to work for him even after he supposedly assaulted her, even if he just had a one-night stand, and is even trying to seduce him in his own home with his own wife, that is pretty clearly a warped mentality to have towards someone who treated you that way, and I'll be interested to see if they ever take that dynamic anywhere in the future. Regardless, post-Rudius fixing everything, Zenith, bless her heart, lets Lilia stay with them as family from then on. Paul hasn't really learned any kind of moral lesson at all, and Rudius now has 2 different siblings, Zenith's new child Norn and Lilia's child Aisha, and at first I genuinely thought that Lilia's child would be the redhead that we see in the ED, especially since Lilia now feels some kind of eternal debt to Rudius and wants her child to serve him. but I'm not really sure that the age gap and timeline there really lines up, so I don't know what's going on. Either way, I'm pretty sure both of these kids are going to be really important to the future of this series at some point. Don't ask me how, but the story so far has done a great job of utilizing all of its cast, so that's just intuition on my part. In this episode specifically though, what I find interesting about the new family dynamic with the Zenith and Lilia is that Lilia doesn't even really seem like a maid anymore. It's possible that when Zenith said you're part of the family now, she meant it literally, because they both kind of have a husband-wife dynamic with Paul. They tell him to do things, they kick him when he's being an idiot. It's a pretty big shift, but it's really interesting the way that their situation has developed. All of them also get to finally see what raising a child is actually supposed to be like, and I thought that was a really funny joke about how Rudy's has been freakishly easy to raise compared to how it usually is. Really good comedy again this week, by the way. Rudy's kind of stole the spotlight with all of his monologues and shenanigans, and maybe it's just because there's somebody else to pin all of the scumminess on this episode, but he was really likable and endearing as a character this week. I love the way his relationship with Sylphiette has reached a point where he straight up doesn't want to be apart from her anymore. And we'll get into that in a second, by the way, but he has just reached a point in his life where he is actually perfectly satisfied being with her and living a peaceful life in the middle of nowhere until he dies. And that's not really surprising considering how personal all of his motivations have been so far, but it really does highlight yet again kind of how refreshing Rudius is as a protagonist. He doesn't really have any lofty goals or ambitions, he just wants to live an honest, respectable life in this new world. Sylphiette though, man, I pray that this isn't the last we see of her for a while, because that's the vibe I get. They've already done it to Roxy, and the scene where she's just crying, telling Rudius not to leave her. It hits so hard, man. The animation work, the expressions, the voice acting. I think it's safe to say that Sylphie is my best girl right now, and I just want the best for her. I want the best for me by having her in the series as much as humanly possible, and I'm afraid that I'm going to be betrayed very soon. The reason I feel that way is because by the end of the episode, Rudius is forced into leaving his home to work with a new character, a new species of character, called Ghislaine, who is a beast person, and we'll get into that. Like I said, there's a lot to get into, but everyone says goodbye to Rudius because he specifically asked for a well-paying job so that he could raise the funds needed to let Sylphie go to the Magic University with him. And for one, I like that this is a universe where that money is actually needed. It's not just something Paul can flippantly say, oh yeah, I'll pay for both of you. Like, this is the best school of magic in the entire world, and it makes sense that even the leader of a village like Paul wouldn't just have the cash to do something like that. It's a nice touch, it's subtle world building, and it kind of gives you an idea of the class of people we'll be seeing at the university. Just because Roxy said that they allow anyone in regardless of their social standing or race, doesn't mean that any social standing will actually be able to afford to get in. On the topic of magic though, we also get a little bit of an update on what's going on with Roxy, which is nice because I didn't expect to hear anything from her until Rudius actually sees her again. But she's in a kingdom called Chiron, tutoring a prince, which, good for her, that's a major step up from Rudius, but what I love about this is that she still keeps in contact with Rudius despite the fact that she's probably tutored many other people in her life. And it's kind of a testament to how much she cares about Rudius and how much Rudius changed her life, just as much as she changed his. She's finally able to cast king-level magic, and it's because Rudius helped her overcome the mental block she was having, reaching that point. It also kind of completely defeats the purpose of me asking if she can cast saint-level magic more than once now, because she's trained past that point, so that's outdated. Whatever. What I'm confused about regarding Roxy and her magic now, and something that I'd be interested to hear your guys' take on as well, is that Paul says that you can count the number of king-level magic users in the entire world on both hands. And to me, this just seems like complete nonsense. That's something I would expect to hear about the final level magic, which is God, but not 2 tiers down from that. And I know you guys have mentioned that tiers of magic aren't everything in this universe, and I get it, don't worry, I understand that, but it still doesn't really add up to me that king level magic would be that rare. So either this is a mistranslation, or what I think is more likely is that Paul is just some country bumpkin assuming that king level magic is a bigger deal than it actually is. That makes the most sense to me considering the context of the world and just the way the power scaling system has worked so far in general. You also might have noticed that I've changed the terminology I use for magic, and that's because Funimation subs have also changed their terminology. The new tiers are beginner, intermediate, advanced, saint, king, emperor, and god, which I've heard is the more accurate translation to what people read in the light novels. What I like about what we saw of magic this episode is that Rudius actually incorporates it into the way that he fights, even when he's just using a sword, and what's cool about that is that this assumedly is something you're not going to see very many people do, and it's probably why most people in this world stick to learning one or the other, because while Rudius can use magic while fighting without having to worry about incantations, it's not going to be something easy for everyone else to do. Speaking of fighting and terminology though, we also get a little bit more information, a little bit more lore about the more technical elements of swordplay in this world. The 3 different styles, Sword God style, Water God style, and North God style, as well as a couple tiers, elementary and advanced. I'm not sure how many tiers there will actually be. I would assume the same amount of tiers as there are magic in the world, but the thing with swordsmanship is I'm not even sure if Rudius is ever going to commit to really learning it extensively in the first place. It was kind of just something that was forced on him by Paul, and he doesn't have any interest or passion for it in general, and he's not progressing in it in the way that he does magic, and I just wouldn't really be surprised in general if sometime in the future he said, you know what? I'm done with swords, which is a shame because a fighting mage combination does sound really dope. So where is the story going now? Well, for once in the entire series, we actually have a general idea of what we're transitioning to, because a new character called Ghislaine is taking Rudius somewhere to do something. Okay, maybe we don't actually have a general idea, but hey, a new waifu has been introduced, and I assume she's some family friend since both Paul and Zenith are acquainted with her. And I like her a lot so far, she's pretty cool. I like how realistically antisocial she is because, well, maybe antisocial isn't the right word, but you get a general impression that she doesn't really talk a whole lot. She says yeah to everything just like I do in real life, but she still knows how to communicate when she actually wants to. It's a good demonstration of her character, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her next week. In general though, this was just another wild episode, an episode that I really wasn't expecting, and one that tackled subject material and narrative beats that you really don't see other stories, and especially other isekai, even dare to tackle, so I already have to respect this story for that, and if this is the kind of stuff we're already getting into this early in the series, I can't wait to see where it goes in the future. But that has been all from me. Let me know what you guys thought about that king level magic stuff that I brought up before, and especially I want to hear what you guys think of Paul. Does everybody just hate him now, or are you feeling conflicted on him, or what? Because I feel like that is a major conflict that people should be feeling about him right now. He's a character that I still really can't help but like, even though he is womanizing and kind of scummy. You can let me know in the comments, and if you want to continue the conversation, talk with me and a bunch of other cool people who love this series as well, you can join my Discord community in the description below, where somebody actually showed me that I'm a fake Lord of the Rings fan and that the Mushoku anime team are extremely based. You can also follow me on Twitter and subscribe for the future Mushoku Tensei reviews every single week. I love you, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.